Hey everybody, it's Julie, and I sure hope you're enjoying the summer of stamping this year at ellenhutson.com. Today I'm going to be sharing a couple of fun and easy ideas using the Mondo Anthurium and the It's a Jungle sets. And I'm going to start off with the Mondo Anthurium. I've already prepped my base card. It's made of Canson XL watercolor paper, 140 pound, and it's cut to 8.5 by 5.5 inches and scored at 4.25. Now I'm going to take the Mondo Anthurium die and I'm going to position the left hand side of it just past the edge of that center fold line and then anchor it place with some washi tape. And as I position it onto my platform here on the cutting pad, I want to make sure that the score line and that edge of the die on the left hand side are hanging just outside the cutting pads as I put my sandwich together. That way the pressure's applied on the right hand side, covering the die completely, but I don't actually have pressure applied to the left-hand side, which is not going to cut through. And there you can see it did a beautiful job. I've got that score line there and it didn't cut through all the way, and this die cut shape is then going to stay attached to my base card. Now I'm going to pop out these negative pieces and then grab my scissors. I'm just going to run those scissors along that gutter crease until I meet the edge of my die cut shape. Now, sometimes I get a little nervous that I'm going to squeeze the handles of my scissors too hard and cut right through what I don't want to cut through. So I'll get right up there as close as I can, and then I'll kind of wiggle it and pop it free. And then as I fold this, you'll see I've got this fold over from the partial die cut. It's a really neat effect. I'm going to take my scissors here, and while I have the card folded, there was one little bit that of course didn't get cut out. And I'm just going to trim along there and pop that away, and there we go. We've got a fun fold over from a partial die cut image. It's going to be awesome. So now I'm going to take my bone folder because I'm working with a heavier paper. Sometimes you get pieces of the die that deboss into the paper because it's heavier. And if you don't like that, you can kind of burnish it out a little bit with a bone folder. But trust me, as this card comes together, you will not even see that. It becomes camouflaged completely. So I'm going to take the open card now and pop that into my standard MISTI. I'm going to position the stamp here right over the top, make sure it's in the perfect spot. And then once that's mounted in place, I am going to prep the surface of my paper with an anti-static powder. And the reason I'm doing this is because I decided, for some whatever reason, to heat emboss my ink. So I wanted to make sure that the embossing powder was only going to stick to where I stamped that pigment ink. So I popped that back in after I brush away all the excess powder. And I'm working with the VersaFine Clair ink. This is a faster drying pigment ink, and this color Acorn is just such a rich, warm brown. I absolutely love it. And I want to make sure that card does not shift or move at all on me, so I added a couple extra magnets. I'm going to press down firmly, and then I'm going to take that over to my embossing drawer and pour some clear detail embossing powder over the top of it. And then I'm just going to use my heat gun here on the second setting, which is a higher heat, to go ahead and melt all that embossing powder. Once I have that all completely and thoroughly embossed, I kind of wave it around a couple seconds to make sure it gets all nice and cool. I can go ahead and start doing my watercolor work. Now you can watercolor with anything you like. I often use Kudetake Gansai Tambi watercolors, but I also like using these Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers, and I'm going to apply those to an acrylic block and then use a water brush to dilute the color and pick up the ink. Now I wanted to do some really soft, pale watercolor work on this. So that's why I'm using so much water and diluting the color down. And I'm just going to start with this lighter green color and continue adding that. I'm a sloppy watercolor artist. I like to just kind of slop it around and leave some white space, and some of it's lighter, some of it's darker. Then I'll come in and add this deeper green shade that kind of turns kind of a blue-green as it dilutes out with water. And I love the way it blends with the lighter green color. I just love that variation. And so I'm just going to continue adding a little bit of that darker green here and there to give it some depth and dimension. And then I'm going to clean my brush off there on a clean paper towel. Now to paint my flowers, anthuriums come in some really gorgeous colors of pink. Some are softer than others, but some are really bold red. And as I started doing this, I was like, oh, I want a really soft pale pink. but I hadn't diluted that scarlet red down as much as I wanted. So as I was going along here, I was like, you know what? I'm going to wash that out. So I just cleaned off my brush and then squeezed some clean water onto that flower and kind of moved it around there. And then I'm going to take my dry paper towel and just blot up that excess color and water to just soften the whole thing. And that's a great trick too if you need to, for some reason, maybe shift to a different color on something and you maybe got too much of one color and you want to kind of wash it out. Just add extra water and then blot it up with some clean paper towel. So this is really hard to see on camera, but it is a really soft, pale pink that shows up beautifully when you're holding the card in your hand. Now to highlight the stamens on these, at the base I added some of that really nice bright yellow, and then I'm going to get a little bit of that light green and do the tips there of the stamens, and then I'll come along and do all the stems. And sometimes I deepen the color, a little bit of green as I'm doing the stems, just to create a variation of color. And I'm just going to keep on going until I get it all finished. So this is like one of the most relaxing things for me to do. I'm not really a colorist, but I do enjoy watercoloring things, and I'll do it. It's the one coloring medium that I will reach for if I have to color something in. I just find it very relaxing. So once I'm done with this, I'm just going to give it an overall, okay, yep, I got everything colored the way I want it. There you can see how pretty and pale that pink is. I hope it's picking up on the camera because I love it in real life. I decided now I needed to add my sentiment. I probably should have thought of that from the get-go, but no. Flying by the seat of my pants. But when the card is closed, I determined that mahalo, which means thank you, looked really good right there in that lower right-hand corner. So I went ahead and heat embossed it as well using the same acorn ink and clear embossing pattern. I thought it turned out just gorgeous. Now for the next card, I'm going to watercolor, and I stamped and watercolored all the images ahead of time and die cut them. So I'm working with these Monstera. Is it Monstera? The cheese plant. I think they call it the cheese plant. And I've got one of those tikis, and I thought it would be really fun to turn one of the tikis into like a tropical beverage. So I went ahead and heat embossed them all, watercolored them all, the same exact ink and methods that I used on the previous card. But I needed to determine my layout for where my sentiment was going to go. So I kind of temporarily laid those down onto a quarter sheet of Canson XL watercolor paper because I'm going to do a wash here. And then using the same ink, I'm going to heat emboss this sentiment really quickly. And then I will know where my watercolor wash is going to go because I've got my focal images and I know where those are and the sentiment is going. So I'm going to blend this light green and this deeper green kind of together and get I don't even know what to call it. It's kind of a sea glass green. In the end, this mix of colors together created kind of a sea glass color. And once that's dry, I'm going to mount all my pieces together. And here I've taken the torch from the Tiki set, or from the It's a Jungle set, and I'm just using adhesive to glue that upside down to the back of the Tiki. It's going to serve as a straw. And then at this point, I decided, I had my plan. But as I was winging it here, I'm like, you know what? I need a little bit more texture and interest here. I'm just feeling it. So I decided, since I hadn't cleaned off my acrylic block, to just do some random ink spatters just to add a tiny bit of texture. And then when all this was dry, I trimmed it down and added it to a base card. That's Nina Solar White Standard A2 card, 4¼ by 5½ inches. And then I can go ahead and start mounting all my pieces. Now, some of them are going to get mounted with adhesive runner on the back of them, and then others will be popped up for dimension using some foam tape. So I'm just going along my merry way here, adding all my elements, and some of them will be popped up and some of them are going to be flush. And one thing I wanted to make note of is that the flowers are actually a trio and they die cut as a trio, but I just cut apart the larger flower from the two smaller ones so I could tuck the smaller ones behind the straw and pop the other one up in front. Didn't that turn out cute? I just thought that was the funnest thing. All right, I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.